Alright, so here is the second project that I had PCBWay do for me. I'm sure it wouldn't take many people too long to figure out what that is. This is kind of my version of the ReproPack. If you don't know what that is, this is a new circuit board to use for doing Nintendo reproductions. And I think this one will do about 5 different mappers. NROM, CNROM, UNROM, AORM, possibly AMROM, but I'm not sure about ANROM. And I've also got this one to the point where you can do the panesian-cnroms, which is just a slight wiring difference from CNROM. So the problem that I had, and I said something about this in the other video, with PCBWay is I ordered the Enig finish. Hard gold was it was stupid expensive. So and we're pretty sure the Enig is actually fine. It'll last just fine. But I requested that the edge be beveled. If I can get this on camera or not, but they did not bevel the edges at all. I might get a close-up of that. And I complained, and apparently they're going to redo it for me. I'm not 100% certain of that. And then I also noticed they did not tint the vias, and I know my Gerbers said to, but maybe there was some option that I missed, because sometimes that is an actual checkbox option. I think it was Miro I've seen that on. Speaking of Miro, oh yeah, I also noticed that my dimensions are off just a little bit. I can force it into the cart plastic, but I don't want to have to force it, so I'm going to change those for the final revision. Also, these, I think I made these 6 thou trace and space, and I went back and changed that to 10 thou trace, but I kept the 6 thou space just so the polygon fill would get in all the places and we wouldn't have giant gaps. Like I still have a couple gaps where polygon, or I think the bottom is ground, actually could not get in there and fill the gaps between the traces. A little bit of that's just fine. What was I saying? Oh, speaking of Miro, I actually switched to PCBWay after finding out Miro, which I believe is Canada-based. I believe they actually have maybe some places in the US as well. But I thought it was all North America fabbed and assembled, and it's not. It's made in China. And I didn't really know that or understand that until I started looking at the charges, and they wanted to charge me $50 shipping for something, and I asked about it, and they said, well, that's the shipping charge to send all the components to China. And I was like, why? I was like, they can source that shit there, can't they? I mean, that's where it's probably made. But then I was just like, if the shit's being made in China, then I'll just have a China manufacturer make it. And it was just within days that Kevtris actually said something about using PCBWay. So I looked into it, and I had the Turbo Duo region mod board made through them, and that turned out pretty good. Very happy with the product, and the shipping is. This one also was only like a week after I paid for it that it actually came in the mail. Super quick. Really like that. I mean, it's actually even quicker than OSH Park, and there's more versatility in your order. Now it might be a little more expensive because OSH Park is damn cheap, and usually it's free shipping too. But this is 1.2 millimeter. That's how thin the PCB is on original Nintendo game, and OSH Park does not do that. That's one of the things that held me up. I got to backtrack. I actually started this project at least 4 years ago, and I can actually prove it. I have Eagle files where I was actually reverse engineering the ReproPack, and I don't remember if that time it was still available or not, but I just wanted to make my own, you know, and it was, I think he sold them for like $4, and now that I know what I know, I probably should have just been buying them instead of trying to reproduce them. But I don't think it's available anymore, and in fact there's a couple other people that offer repro PCBs now too. Retro Stage and Infinite NES Lives are the two that come to mind. One other thing I will mention is that I ordered 10 boards and got 11. Again, not unheard of, but it's always a nice surprise. I also was thinking about giving it a name, because that's modern society, man. We name everything. I hate it. But I kind of need to figure out how many mappers it'll do before we settle on a name, because I kind of want to integrate the number, or like a prefix that means number, like penta, into the name, and then come up with something semi-interesting. So yeah, let's get a close-up, and then I'll actually start putting sockets on here, so I can start testing with different mappers and different chips and whatnot to try to get this thing figured out. Alright, so there's a decently close look, and you can see I can actually force it into this plastic. It's extra tight, and one of the things I wanted to look at was to make sure that the edge of the chip or caps or the CIC, I think this is the AVR version, does not come down enough to hit those supports right there, because it happened to me with Mega Man Ultra, I believe. It was a 28 pin package for the prog, and putting the 32 pin on there, cutting that cap off the end, and of course then your chip was sticking out way far over there, so I actually had to end up cutting those gussets out to get it to fit there like that. So, and I do think I know what happened with my dimensions being wrong. In Eagle, I think I had to there actually is a library that has a Nintendo cartridge package or device or whatever, but it doesn't have these tabs that come out like this, and this is one of the main advantages to my board that neither the Repro Pack nor Retro Stages does. Infinite NES Lives does have them, but that's because he's got this giant board that does everything, and it has to come up, and so those cutouts are there. So I put them in here because I was paying for that dimension anyway. They may as well be there, so they are there. But I think I copied from like that up of the dimension of another board that I was working, probably that NROM board that I was working on like 4 years ago. I copied the traces for the dimension layer from that one onto the original device, NES device, the unmodified one, to put those cutouts on there, and I think that's where it got screwed up. So I'll definitely go back and change that, but like I said, this is not the final revision. That's why I'm doing this. This is just a run of prototypes, so I can get it here and check it out and see what's going on with it. Also, if you're curious, I do plan on making an all surface mount version of this, possibly where we already have flash or EEPROM or something already in place, and possibly RAM already in place, and possibly the 32 and 161 already in place, and maybe some kind of jumpers to disable them, possibly. I'm not sure about that. And of course the CIC clone SMD version already in place. But we want to get through this one first. Alright, I'm going to put dual wipes all over this, because I do plan to keep these prototypes as testers for any future repros that I do. So it makes sense to have dual wipes, because the single inline ones that I normally use, they just wear out over time. What I don't have is 14 pin dual wipes. All I got is 16. So I'm gonna see about cutting the 16 down, maybe,
or maybe I guess just what I'll do is just try to pop some pins out maybe. So it'll fit in there. Hey, look at that. That'll work. I don't know why, but I got a couple spots of solder over here. I think that solder mask isn't doing its job, but they should just kind of flake off if they're not stuck to anything. They did. I don't know what the hell made them stick there to begin with. It's making me question the quality of that solder mask. So that makes them all soldered down. I'm not going to worry about putting the CIC clone on there because I test all my stuff on a top loader, you know, and if I want to test the actual cyclone, I'm going to have to put it in a front loader. And I mean, we know the cyclone works. It's not really in question. I just need to make sure it's set, I guess. So I need to put 4.1 microfarad caps in there. I might have to dig for those. I haven't used a 0.1 microfarad leaded cap, and I don't know how long. Yeah, here's my go-to box of components. I haven't touched for so long that I done forgot that I even had it. I believe these are what I need. Yeah. I'm getting old, can't even read that. 104, right. Oh, let's see, 75 ohms, oh yeah. Used to use those a lot. Let's see. 120, 200, 1Ks, used to use 1Ks a ton. These cases are really good for storing stuff like this. It just, now everything's SMD, so you know, this amount of stuff will fit into a little tiny tub like that. Those are awesome. Alright. It occurs to me I could use another one for the 161, although it's not the end of the world. I'm thinking I might even do a dual footprint for these caps and have a footprint for an SMD cap. It's just easier. Even if I do sell, you know, a through-hole board, may as well give everybody options, right? And this is the kind of leg that I like to cut off and save, especially for the dual region mod and repro wiring. I use these as wires. Got an entire giant tray full of them. So now I just need to decide which one I'm going to make this. I already have a good NROM test board, which I can't remember the last time I did any NROM repros. but I want to try it at some point just to make sure it works. To make sure all the jumpering is correct for it. Yeah, other than the notches to hold the PCB in place, which I have bitched about that a couple times when RetroStage first posted on Nintendo Ages that he was doing them. I was like, why don't you put those in there? You know, he comes straight up from this inside corner. Because I was like, you know, this PCB gets pulled down. You know, if the cart connector is really tight, and some of the old Yobos are really tight, it pulls on the PCB, and you're pulled on the shell. So therefore, all the force is transferred to these two little pegs right here. If these aren't there, you know, and even the old Nintendo NROM boards don't come over the top of that either. So, and neither does the Repro pack. One of the other improvements I made was I took the solder mask down below where the fingers turn into traces. That was a huge thing, and I can't believe nobody was doing that. The Repro pack doesn't even do it. If you look really, really close, you can see some exposed trace right on the top edge of the fingers. And the RetroStage boards didn't do it either. Here's this MMC1 board. This one's less easy to see, but if you really get in there and look, and you can see it's just a tiny, tiny trace, and just a tiny, tiny bit of it is exposed right where they meet, right where they transform from finger to trace. And I don't think that we noticed this when we were first looking at him, but these two pins are connected, but his connection trace is way down here. What the hell? It has to be up here in the under the solder mask. You know, it's going to get disconnected just from corrosion or whatever. I want to say they were all like that. Yep, right there it is. And the discrete PCB, yeah, also like that. And none of them have those notches. Crazy. We were talking about some of the pads. You know, I like these oval pads, and some of his pads are these little tiny circles, and they're a little bit harder to solder. Like his Prog SRAM is all those circles. The Char RAM is the circles. And so it's like that for all his boards. Char RAM circles. Yeah, the discrete RAM is all circles for the Char. That brings me to another improvement I made on my board. And that was even the Repro pack, and looks like no, this one's got an extra, but the MMC1 and the discrete are limited to 1 or 2 megabit chips. Right here. For the Prog, and the Char is limited to 1 and 2 meg when it's data, not RAM. Looks like the same goes on let's see, the MMC3. Now the MMC3 has a 4 meg capability. So it looks like somewhere over here he's got another jumper to make that happen, I guess. And I've made it possible to use 64, 128, 256, 512, 124, and even 8 megabit. just about the whole range of 28 and 32 pin chips. And I do that with my jumpers. And if I can think of a reason, I'll probably upgrade the char to 32 pin. I'm just not sure if any of the mappers that this board does has any need for 32 pin char, but maybe that's one of the things that Kev will set me straight on, because he's going to take a look at this board and get his. I'm going to get his approval before I actually go into production with it. Well, as expected, I have ran into several problems already, but to me, I just couldn't visualize them until I had an actual physical PCB on hand to start laying out all the jumpers. And this one actually is working with NROM. I just tested it, but I've got a couple jumpers here and here. Since these are 2764 for char and 27128 for prog, pin 27 is PGM, which needs to be tied high for read, and I don't have jumpers set up in here or wherever to tie those high. I think I'll have to completely add a jumper for this pin, but I think over here, I think it comes up to what is the prog A14 or PA14 jumper. I can just make that a two-way, like down here, to either go to PA14 to prog 14 or to power. I want to say, what else was there? Oh, the biggest problem that I found, I couldn't believe this, but I've got these 5-way jumpers right here. There's 3 of them. And somehow I screwed it up in Eagle, and the package does not match the symbol. So I think it's the second and third pads are switched. And I didn't know that until I started looking at, what signal was it? I think it was, it was for char pin 1, for like the panesians. And I believe it was my middle pad here. I needed to be able to tie char pin 1 to the 161 pin 12, and somehow my pads were messed up, and I've actually got it to the pad next to it's PA17, so that's messed up, and that's a big downer, because that might actually keep me from testing the other mappers. But so there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 pads to just for the smallest NROM, which seems like a lot. I mean, you only have to do it once if you're doing a repro. And I might as well try to use larger chips with an NROM game and just kind of double the data up, because I've got this where I can put an 8 megabit chip on the prog. Since it's 28 pin over here, I could put a 512 up to a 512 on the char data. And there's no NROM games that use char RAM that I know of. I think there were some Japanese ones maybe, but there's so few, we're not going to worry about it. Alright, just to prove that the NROM is working, finicky, you see it up there. I think actually my power strip is finicky. I used to do this repro a lot back in the day when I had a bunch of NROM carts I wanted to get rid of. I should say NROM donor carts that I wanted to get rid of. I've already played through a full couple levels of this, and it worked fine, so I think I'll be okay.
anyway, NROM works. Alright, so I've looked at it, and for NROMs, well, for this board anyway, the char is 20. If I keep it 28 pin, the base you're going to get is 512, right? Well, as long as you don't accidentally put the jumper for pin 1 to be connected up to the address, then it'll just be pegged high. It'll be F4, connection F4. So that'll never hurt anything as long as, if you do use a 512, as long as you double up the char, just keep doubling it until you get actual, what was it, 32? Whatever. As long as you fill it with data, that'll be fine. But what I was interested in is getting a 32 pin on the prog, and I did a quick check, and I don't think I have any 8 megabit chips left. I might have one actually, but I found an 040 EEPROM, so I know I could erase it real quick. And what I found interesting was the 29F040, the 39SF040, A18 is on pin 1, but on a 27C040, it's on 31. So it won't matter here because pin 1 is tied high permanently. For these boards, there's never going to be much any reason to use that big of a chip, so it really won't be a problem. So I'm just curious if the game still works. Let me do something about that. It appears that it does. At some point I think I'll try to dump some of these games with different size chips and whatnot. I really hope I don't see any difference. Get away! So, I think we'll try to move on and just to see if I can, because it's still going to be a while before I can redo the boards and get some of those mistakes fixed. So I might as well try to rewire these as much as I can to try to get the other mappers just to see if they'll work. Alright, so the one thing I missed on the NROMs was I had to pull down, or you're supposed to pull down PA 15, 16, and 17. I guess that really only matters if you're using a 32 pin chip though on the prog, because those signals don't exist on a 28 pin. So anyway, it doesn't hurt to go ahead and pull them down even if you do have a 28 pinner in there. So like I said, these 5 ways are messed up right now. So I looked at it, and PA 15, 16, 17 are the middle pad, and they're supposed to be pad number 2, and pad number 1 is ground. So I basically just jumpered all 3 of them because the current second pad is one of the 161 pins. So it doesn't, it's not populated, so it doesn't hurt it to pull it down. So in the fixed revision, it'll just be the first jumper, the first 2 pads. Alright, so now I'm going to test UNROM. So of course we've got char RAM, and I'm actually using a 62-256. No. I'm going to check it with a 256, but right now I've got a 6264 in here. And I think 6264 and 62256 is about the only 28 pin RAM chips that we can use here for dip anyway. And I went and looked, and every single NES game UNROM is 128K. So that, to me, that means there's going to be no UNROM games, hacks, or anything that are smaller than that. So we're going to be using 1 meg and higher for all UNROMs. So that made it a little bit easy. And here's our jumper situation. Basically we have at least 1 jumper on every grouping except for D, because that connects, was it PA14 to prog A14, and nothing actually come out to be a problem on this one, although I guess I do need to recheck. I think, what was it, D was, there was something about that on the NROM I needed to check, to add a pad for power. No, that was the 28 pin, wasn't it? To try to get pin, I guess it would be 29 on this one, so yeah. So yeah, I don't think anything's wrong here with the NROM, so I got a Rodland programmed onto the 29F010. And of course, you remember the 29F010 pin 1 is not connected. So there's actually a jumper that we don't need to do, but may as well just do it because it's, you know, if anybody puts an 020 or 040 or 080, then that jumper needs to be made. So we'll just say all of them. Alright, so there's Rodland NROM. That's about all I usually test, just a level or two. But like I said, if we ever do the copy nest dumping it thing, we'll add that later. Alright, so this is the NROM with the 4 meg chip. And I've already played a level of it, so I know it works fine. I just wanted to show it. There you go, working. One thing I wanted to do was to try it with the 62-256 RAM, though. I didn't find one. Alright, there it's running with the 62-256. I kind of had a feeling that it would be fine. I think mostly I was worried about maybe pin 1 if it needed to be pulled high. Alright, next one. Okay, so CNROM. This one is where my 5-way jumper issue really comes to light. I'm not sure if you can see these little jumpers up here, but I had to jumper over pads twice. There's 5 of them there. But everything else went pretty well, I guess. Once I fixed those, then CNROM actually should be okay. Okay, so we'll test the CNROM. It was a Moid Kun or some weird Japanese puzzle game. And these are both 256 EPROMs. Yeah, I have no idea how to pronounce that. But it does seem to work. Oh, I screwed up. Alright, so to me that works. So next I want to try probably the same game. Let's start with 512 of the char. I'm sure it'll be fine. And then we'll start working up on the prog chips. So yeah, so I'm about to do the CNROM. I doubled up the char data. And I found another chip that I hadn't found yet. This is a 27SF EEPROM. 512. As far as I can tell, same pinout as a 27C. And I do have pin 1 pulled high, so with A15 on the... That don't look right. Well, it is... It does look like the char's messed up, doesn't it? Yeah. Char's messed up. I might need to investigate this a little bit. Alright, so now I've got a 27C 512 in there. And that actually appears to be working. So I might need to investigate why the 27SF doesn't, but I don't really know how many people are actually going to try to use this with that particular chip anyway, so whatever. Let's move on to prog. Alright, so this is doubled up prog 27C 512. I figured it would probably play just the same, and it looks like it's going to. I'll get this game figured out eventually, right? Okay, so another 512 on the prog. This is a 32 pin chip, an Atmel 29C512. I didn't know these existed either, but I had one in my drawer. But it's stuff like that makes me want to try to get a 32 pin package on the char side as well. The only difference is pin 1, 2, and 30 are not connected on that chip, but it's really the same pin out otherwise. So I didn't expect any problems out of it, and it doesn't look like it's going to give me any. Okay. Alright, so doubled again to 1 meg. This is a EEPROM 28F101. Nothing, no jumpers have changed or nothing like that. I don't think it's going to matter as long as the game is so small. Works. Alright, doubled again. This is a 2 meg EEPROM. It's all I had handy. 27C020. Works. Alright, doubled again to 4 meg. This is a EEPROM 27C040. Shocker, it works. Wasn't expecting any problems really. Probably not going to try an 8 meg, mostly because I think I only have one of those left, and again, just not expecting any problems with the variations like that. It's really variations in pinouts and stuff that I'm worried about. But alright, let's move on to AORM. I'm going to test AORM first. It's possible that AMROM will work, but I'm not sure about ANROM because ANROM has another chip, 7402, and I'm not sure if I can implement that very well yet or not, and we'll get to that later. So RAM chip, and again I'm sure the 6264 or the 62256 is going to work just fine because it has so far. The one thing I was kind of worried about was, I mean, so far all the games are 1 or 2 megbit, 128 or 256 kilobytes, but pin 30 is not connected on an EEPROM pin 30 or EEPROM A17. But it is connected to the 161. So I'm wondering if that's an NC, does that mean, let's say I think it's pin 12, does that mean pin 12 is left floating and that's an input? And isn't that bad? So something I'll have to talk to Ketris about or something. But this one has a lot more jumpers up here, kind of like, what was it, NROM. We're not grounding PA 15, 16, or 17, but we are connecting them to the 161 pins, which is, I think, bridge 2 on EFG. We have to make C bridge 2, so was it PD4 is sent to the 161 input on D, and then mirroring is mapper controlled mirroring. So we'll do bridge 2 there. A and B are the right pads, so we're sending PA 15 and 17 on up here instead of just pulling them high. What are the right 3 pads? Char pin 1. Let's see. I think that's F. Gets pulled high. I think that's about it. Let's give it a test. Alright, first test for AORM. We're going to do a 256 kilobyte game, Battletoads Double Dragon. Whatever. I don't think I've ever played this before, but it seems to work great. So let's move on to something else. Alright, AMROM. I got Nightmare on Elm Street. Anyway, it seems to work. So if you can do AORM, you can probably do BNROM, and as long as you set your mirroring. And there's only 2 games. Deadly Towers US and one called Mishao or something like that for Japan. And I think they're both like horizontal mirroring, so you said the V bridge. There's Deadly Towers. Also never played this game. So I can knife the fireballs. Whatever. Appears to work, so I'm going to try the Jap one now. So yeah, my mistake. The Japanese Mishao or whatever, that is Deadly Towers. So there's the same game. So basically there's only one BNROM game. Official. I don't know about homebrew or hacks or translations or whatever. Well, that's all English. Fireballs are brutal. Whatever, BNROM works, yay. I just tried NROM, didn't work, got gray screen. I just think that it does not work without the 7402 being in there, so if I find out if it's easy to wire in, I might put it in. I don't know yet, but it's funny because the Repro Pack and Retro Stages PCB don't mention that ANROM doesn't work. It just kind of says A*ROM, as in all AORM stuff works, but I don't know. Well, the last thing I wanted to try was the Panesians, and it looks like it works. Didn't have nothing and I got it. So as far as I can tell, that's all of the mappers that I wanted to try with this board. It's been a few days making this video, but I'm already in the middle of redesigning the entire board to try to get a 32 pin package for the char, just in case people want to use the bigger footprint. There was something else. Yeah, I had to do some reworking to get gnrom to work, which should be very similar to the other ones. There's just a little bit of differences, and I think the way it uses PD, was it 4 and 5 or something like that on input, what, C and D of the 161. So that should be a go-to on the next revision. So that's it for now.